Hey everybody, my name is Brandon. Welcome back to Cinefessions, where we talk all things media, and I am so excited that we have the return of Visual Veangeance, one of my absolute favorite labels from last year. I call them the anti-boutique label because they release some incredibly fun, super low-budget schlock, and they are finally back after what felt like a very long hiatus from last year. They are back with a couple brand new releases this month. I talked about both of them in my anticipated releases video. Well, fortunately, they sent them over for me to review yet again. So I will mention I have all of their releases here on the channel, reviews of all of them on the channel, I should say. So if you want to hear my thoughts on any of them, definitely check out the playlist I have. But today, specifically, we are looking at one release, Spine number 9, which came out earlier this week. We have Brett McCormick's RepliGator, and this thing is nuts. So let's go through the movie, the special features, and the AV quality like we always do with my Blu-ray reviews. Before we get into all that though, if you do have a quick second, go ahead and hit that like button down below. That engagement really does help me out. But with that said, let's not waste any more time at all. Let's dive right into my review of RepliGator from Visual Veangeance. So RepliGator is Spine number 9 from Visual Veangeance, a September 2023 release date on this one, and it's a film from 1998. You can see it has beautiful cover art here on the slip cover, that very seductive RepliGator there, which is always fun. But I'll take the slip cover off and you can see the awesome artwork on the cover there. It looks so cool. My favorite part though, we're going to open this up. Look at inside here. This is awesome. So not only do you have your stickers like we normally get, but we have X-ray specs, which is really cool. Obviously, they are just blank, but it plays a part into the film, so that's always cool to see. And then the stickers that you get with every Visual Veangeance release, plus the awesome poster as well. Let me open this up real quick. These come in all of their releases. The only one I don't have is LA Age Jabber. There was a production glitch, and so not every release got one. And so that's the only one I'm missing of these posters, which is a little disappointing, but they did offer to replace it for me. I just said, don't waste your time. But anyway, this one here too, we have, it's not a booklet because it's just like a pamphlet, I'll call it, but some more information on RepliGator there, which is always cool. You can actually see the transformation, which is fun. But the best part, I think, is this reversible cover art. Now, I will mention on the packaging, it calls this the original VHS cover art. However, in the commentary track with the director, they talk about how it never had a VHS release. So they didn't sound super positive, but they didn't believe it did. So maybe it actually did have a VHS release. But either way, this is some original cover art there, which I think just looks fantastic. I love that so much. So this is the side I am rocking as always. But yeah, that is your look at the Blu-ray itself. So now let's jump over and talk about the film RepliGator. So RepliGator is from 1998, directed by Brett McCormick, and this was his year of trying to be Roger Corman. He was trying to release 5 films in 1 year, so that kind of gives you an idea of what you're getting into here. This is low budget, as schlocky as it gets. This is not shot on video though, like a lot of the Visual Veangeance releases. This is actually shot on 35mm for the majority of the film, but because it wasn't long enough, they had to go back and film a like bookend to the movie, and that was actually shot on 16mm. That's where we get Gunnar Hansen, of course, Leatherface, and we get the Scream Queen Brink Stevens in it as well. They are in kind of the bookend of the movie. But anyway, RepliGator, we are following this like a secret military mission where the scientists are trying to come up with this replicator. They're trying to create a replicator, which does exactly what you would think it would do. And then there's another scientist who is also trying to come up with this like brainwashing thing that will essentially turn people into slaves, is what the goal is what they say. And so these two end up combining at one point, and they are going to now test this replicator for the first time. They send a soldier in, and instead of it just replicating him, instead it turns him into a beautiful woman. And that's what happens when you go into this replicator. Not only that though, when this said beautiful woman has an orgasm, she ends up turning into the RepliGator. She turns into an alligator. It is the most absurd thing in the world, but it is hilarious. So they're trying to basically correct that, and they, these replicators are getting out and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's the story. Really, the story means very little here. Why you're watching this is for the TNA. Like, it is absolutely filled to the brim with beautiful women getting topless. And so if that's what you're looking for, you're going to have a good time with RepliGator. That said, this Visual Veangeance release feels a lot different than some of their other ones. Not only is it not shot on video, to be fair, there are a couple others that were not shot on video also, but on top of that, and what really sets it apart is just the tone of this movie. It's not sexy enough to be like a Skinamax movie, yet it's going with like the nudity up to that level. But at the same time, it's super goofy. Now, there are points in this movie where it's genuinely funny. I think Gunnar Hansen does a really good job. He has really strong comedic timing. And so I think him bookending the movie is really well done. But outside of that, it gets almost like Three Stooges-esque at points. That's how absurd and over the top it is. So you're not getting a serious film in this at all. The director was very aware, and the writer, very aware of what they're doing in this. It is simply eye candy. That's exactly what it is. It plays into that stereotypical male fantasy hard, and it really goes for it. Incredibly non-PC by today's standards. Keep that in mind going in. If you are someone who doesn't like watching things like that, then you definitely don't want to check this one out. But as someone who enjoys these schlocky, low-budget, ridiculous things like this, I had a really good time with this. Like, it is slower at points than some of the other Visual Veangeance releases I've seen. So maybe not the best of their releases in terms of the actual movie itself, but frankly, it looks better than most of their releases. The sound is a little questionable. I'll talk about that when I get to the AV side of things, but it's so utterly absurd, and the whole thing feels absurdist. And I think that helps the movie, because it really lets the viewer just live in these like nudity moments, because that's really what this film is about. So it is completely ridiculous. It's not a good movie. They're aware it's not a good movie, and they're really kind of playing that up. But because of that, it has its own unique charm to it that I thoroughly enjoyed. So, not my favorite of the Visual Veangeance movies I've seen, but I will admit, after watching the special features, I do appreciate it more, which is what's so great about special features to begin with. But that said, I will give you what my rating for RepliGator is. I'm going to give RepliGator from 1998 2.5 out of 5 stars. I'll quickly talk about the AV side of this disc from Visual Veangeance, because I think this looks awesome. This is frankly probably the best looking release from them that I've seen so far, even though you do get that warning at the beginning like you get with all of their releases that says, hey, this is the best we could do. If there's any flaws, it's because of the original source material, not really anything that we could do about. But here, I don't even think that warning is necessary, because it looks really good. The fact that it's shot on film obviously is going to help that, and I think they really played into that. So the Blu-ray transfer on this looks great. On the audio side, there were some moments where I think it was just the actors were talking so quietly that I did not lose a little bit of that dialogue, but I did have to listen harder to pick up all of the dialogue. So that was the only part of this release that I wish they could have like maybe mastered a little bit more, just to crank up some of those lines of dialogue that maybe weren't quite as loud as everything else going on around it. And I'll also mention, I'm not factoring this in at all, but into like my scores of this disc, but on the menus, when you go into a special feature, the music that plays at the start or at the end of it is super loud compared to the actual like interview that they're doing. That was just an annoyance. I don't know. Again, nothing I will factor into like my review of this release, but something I just wanted to mention, I guess. But anyway, on the AV side of this, I thought this looked great. No qualms really at all. With the visual side, the audio side, it could have used maybe a few more tweaks to get it up to that like great level that the picture's at. And finally, the special features on this disc. There are 5 different interviews on here that are new as of 2022. The longest one is with Brett McCormick. That is about 22, 23 minutes long. And I thought that one was really well done. And then there are some shorter ones. All of them are under 10 minutes. You get Brink Stevens in there, the producer, individuals like that. You get like the main villain in it as well. But that one's only like 3 minutes long. I'm not sure why that was so short. But anyway, the only missed interview on here that I really would have loved to see would have been something with Gunnar Hansen, but I'm sure that probably was cost prohibitive given everything that's going on here and given who he is. I'm sure he would have charged, money in order to be on something like this. But I did love that we have Brink Stevens, and the interview with Brink Stevens really made me realize, like, when these releases happen, they go back and interview some of these like famous actors that are in these low budget films. Like, she was on the set for 1 day. And so now she's being interviewed 20 plus 30 whatever years later. And 30, I can't do math at all, like 1998, 25-ish years later, I guess, she's going back to talk about this, that she literally spent 1 day of her life doing. And so she does have some interesting things to talk about behind the scenes, but I just think, like, man, you must have racked your brain to come up with something to talk about for this interview, because it was 1 day. You've done countless movies. Like, how would you possibly remember this? Now, obviously, once this is released, they would watch it, things like that. So I'm sure it sticks in their mind more than I'm giving credit for, but still, I just thought that was an interesting kind of takeaway from that, was that the fact that she has all this to say about it, but it was 1 day of her life 25 years ago. But anyway, that aside, the other special features on here, there are some there's like an archival interview with the director. That one's relatively short, maybe like 4 or 5 minutes. And then there is an archival making of featurette as well, where you do get some of those talking head behind the scene things that you would expect to see from a standard making of documentary. And then on top of that, there are 2 commentaries. The first one is with the director and the producer. And that one, now let me throw out here right away, I did not watch both commentary tracks from start to finish. I watched snippets of each of them just to have an idea of what they sounded like. And I will admit, the one with the director and the producer was not extremely lively, I guess. They didn't sound bored, but it wasn't very lively. And it takes a lot for me to really get hooked into a commentary track, so that one just didn't do it for me. And then on the other side of that, there is one with Sean Panico of BNS About Movies and Bill Van Ryn of Drive-In Asylum. And that one I thought was done pretty well. It is just like 2 film geeks talking about the movie and some of like the interesting things they've learned about the film over the years. And so that one is for a very specific audience, but if you like that style of commentary track, I think you'll get a kick out of that one. So I think the special features on this are done really well, including the packaging, I think is awesome. So this really gave me a bigger appreciation for the film after, having watched the movie and then checking out the special features. That's what's awesome about special features, especially on releases like this. You might watch something and it might be forgettable or just not that great, but then you watch the special features and you realize the amount of work that went into it. Like for this film, for example, they filmed all of this on the leftover set from Brett McCormick's earlier film, which hopefully is coming out from Visual Veangeance because it was available on the trailers at the start of the disc. But that one looks awesome. And then they reused the sets for this movie because the goal for McCormick that year was to film 5 movies in 1 year, like he heard that Roger Corman did back in the day. And so it's just like interesting tidbits like that you pick up as you're watching these that just make you appreciate what's going on here more than if you didn't watch them. So I highly recommend the special features on RepliGator. In the film, they actually refer to the RepliGators as Gator Babes, and I feel like that would have been the most 90s perfect title ever, so I'm a little disappointed they decided to go with RepliGator when Gator Babes was such an obvious, clear winner there in my eyes. But either way, this is such a ridiculous, over-the-top film that I can't help but recommend it if you are someone who likes that very niche style of filmmaking. If you enjoy what Visual Veangeance has put out in the past, you're likely the target audience for this one. So I definitely recommend RepliGator. I am very happy to have this one in the collection. And even though it does feel tonally different, it still just fits with what they're trying to do at Visual Veangeance. So I thoroughly enjoyed this release. I am going to give RepliGator from Visual Veangeance 3.5 out of 5 stars. All right, so those are my thoughts on RepliGator. This one was such a fun one, just like almost all of the Visual Veangeance releases have been. And that said, make sure you tune back in next week when I will be talking about spine number 10, The Abomination. This is also from Brett McCormick. This one is actually from 1986, so this one about 12 years before RepliGator. So my only thing is, I wish that would have been spine number 9, and then RepliGator spine number 10, so I could have watched them in order, but I'm just weird like that, and I could have watched them in any order I wanted to, but this just felt right. So anyway, guys, let me know what your thoughts are on RepliGator. Is this something that you want to pick up now, or does it sound like maybe something you can skip? Let me know what you think about this one and anything else down in the comments below. I appreciate any and all support down there. But as always, guys, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button down below. That engagement really does help me out, and like I always say, I don't just talk movies, I talk all things media. Books, movies, video games, graphic novels, manga. If it's media related, I'm interested in it, and if you are too, you might consider subscribing. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for today. I just want to send a big thank you to Visual Veangeance for sending RepliGator over for review. I had such a great time with it. Thank you all for checking this one out, and before you go, I just want to encourage you to consume some media today. I'll catch you next time.